Verse 10 to 17, the purpose of the parables. In Matthew 13, Jesus begins speaking to the crowds in parables, short narratives drawn from everyday life that conceal as much as they reveal. After delivering the parable of the sower, the disciples approach him with a question. Why do you speak to them in parables? Matthew 13, verse 10. The Lord's response unveils the spiritual condition of Israel in that generation and explains the judicial nature of his teaching. Jesus answers in verse 11, because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. The word mysteries refers not to something mysterious in the modern sense, but to truths once hidden and now being revealed. The kingdom realities that had long been in the law and the prophets were now being disclosed through Christ. Yet this unveiling was selective. The disciples were granted understanding, while the larger crowds remained in blindness. Verse 12 continues, for whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. This statement reflects the principle of spiritual perception. Those who received the revelation of the kingdom through Christ would see increasing clarity. Those who rejected him would lose even their limited understanding of God's purposes. Jesus then explains the function of the parables in verse 13. Therefore, I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. The issue was not intellectual ability, but spiritual condition. Israel had long been entrusted with the oracles of God. The scriptures were read in their synagogues, the promises were known, and the expectation of Messiah was embedded in their history. Yet when the fulfillment stood before them, many remained hardened. To explain this condition, Jesus cites the prophecy of Isaiah in verses 14 to 15. Isaiah had spoken of a people whose hearts had grown dull, whose ears were hard of hearing, and whose eyes they had closed. This prophecy, given centuries earlier, found its historical realization in the generation encountering Jesus' ministry. Their resistance was not sudden, but the culmination of a long pattern within Israel's covenant history. The prophetic warning had matured into present reality. Isaiah's words also revealed the judicial dimension of God's dealings. The dullness described was both the result of persistent unbelief and the means by which judgment unfolded. The parables, therefore, served a dual purpose. For those given insight, they illuminated the nature of the kingdom. For those who resisted, they concealed the truth and confirmed the hardness already present. Yet in contrast to the blindness of the crowds, Jesus turns to his disciples and pronounces a blessing in verse 16. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. The disciples were witnessing what generations before them had long anticipated. The prophets had spoken of the coming reign of God, the restoration of Israel, and the arrival of the Anointed One. The righteous of earlier times had looked forward to these realities through promise and shadow. Jesus concludes in verse 17, for assuredly I say to you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. The moment unfolding before the disciples was the turning point of the ages. What had been foretold throughout the Hebrew scriptures was now appearing in fulfillment. The kingdom of heaven was no longer merely promised. It was present in the person and work of Christ. Thus, Matthew 13, verse 10 to 17 reveals the dividing line created by the ministry of Jesus. The same words that opened the eyes of some confirmed the blindness of others. The parables were not merely teaching tools, but instruments within God's redemptive unfolding, revealing the kingdom to those granted understanding, while marking the culmination of Israel's long history of prophetic warning.